Shalom Aleichem again, and welcome to everybody here. My name is Moshe Schwed, Director of All DAF. Welcome to all those who have come here. I've met people who've traveled from Baltimore, Manhattan, Edison, Muncie, I'm sure other places as well. Thank you very much for coming. It's a great honor. Rabbi Zecharia, please sit here. And Rabbi Zecharia Resnik from Eretz Yisrael certainly should be sitting right here. Sit down. On behalf of the OU leadership, Mr. Moshe Bain, President, Rabbi Moshe Hauer, Executive Vice President, I'd like to thank everybody once again for coming, and all those who are all DAF users and listen to Rabbi Zecharia Resnik and all the other Maggid Shiur, whether on all DAF or just all those who are learning DAF Yomi. We feel like one family, and we appreciate you tuning in. The All DAF app and website has been sponsored Lilu Nishmas, Rav Meir ben Rav Chaim Waknin, who's a Jew from Casablanca, Morocco, unfortunately passed away during COVID-19. Yehei Zichroi Baruch. The global Siyum. We've had a Siyum sponsor, I believe, since Masechta Shabbos, the Goldberg family. Thank you, Mr. Josh Goldberg, who came in special from the Upper West Side, who's dedicated this Siyum and the previous Siyum in memory of his brother, Elliot, Yitzchak Isaac, ben Harav Eliezer. And he has a fascinating story himself. He's somebody who wasn't supposed to live, according to the doctors, past 5 years old, but he made it until 47. In and out of the hospital dozens of times. I always say this by every Siyum. He's an inspiration for all those, especially learning Daf Yomi, the day in, the day out grind. May his memory be a blessing for all of us, and we should continue learning in his memory. This Siyum has been sponsored by an anonymous person who took care literally of everything here. All the food, the hall, the catering, in memory of Dov Pinchas ben Moshe, Rechama Chaya Fruma Bas Dov Pinchas, and Yechiel Shraga ben Avram Alevi. Thank you, Mr. Anonymous. One more anonymous, in memory of Ha'isha Rivka Bas Rabbi Yaakov Blumenfeld, who actually is a great aunt of mine as well, who passed away without any children. So all the learning today and the schusim should be a schus for her neshama. We want to make this quick. Zecharia does everything quickly, so I'm not going to slow things down. We find in Gemara Rosh Hashanah, the Masechta that we're making a Siyum on today, two members of Rabbi Yechanan. He said one member, the Ikeda Amri said it in a different way, and I think they're both applicable to today's event. The first one, Daf Chav Gimel Amar Aleph, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Kol haloimei Torah ve'einei melamda doimeh lahadas b'midbar. Someone who learns Torah and doesn't teach it is compared to a hadas. A hadas smells very good, but if it's in a midbar, no one could smell it. No one could have anah from it. So someone who learns Torah and doesn't teach it is compared to a hadas in the midbar. Rabbi Zecharia Resnik could have been that loimei Torah and been that hadas in the midbar. But thanks to someone else who doesn't let me say his name, but he's here in the room today, there's a backstory. How did the world find out about Rabbi Resnik? Rabbi Resnik was speaking to his friend, and his friend told him, I just started Brachas Daf Beis today. And he said, okay. Rabbi Zecharia said, I actually gave a shiur to a few guys in my neighborhood, and I recorded it, I'll send it over. So Rabbi Zecharia sent his recording over to this friend, and his friend shared it with a few other people, and one of the listeners loved it and made it into a podcast. Another listener made it into a website. Another listener designed the website. And then they reached out to All DAF, and we're not such nice people all the time, and we pushed them off. And eventually, after getting so many requests for Zecharia Resnik shiur, we put it onto All DAF, and the rest is history. There are thousands of listeners who are having hana from Zecharia Resnik shiur. It's no longer a hadas in the midbar without any people having hana. The fragrance of this hadas is now worldwide and being enjoyed by many. So thank you. The next line in the Gemara, Ikeda Amri, Kol haloimei Torah b'makim she'ein talmidei chachamim doimeh lahadas b'midbar, the chaviv. A little bit of a different spin. Someone who learns Torah in a place where there are no talmidei chachamim is like a hadas in the midbar. It's chaviv, it's beloved. He's the only one teaching this Torah. No one else is teaching this Torah. Has a special chavivos by the Ribbono Shel Olam. Both are true. The first, like we just explained, but the second one is true as well. There are many people who give this style shiur. I think if you take the minutes starting from like 3 to like 29, there's a minute daf for every single shiur. 4-minute daf, 5-minute daf, 6-minute daf, and so on. But I'm not sure if any of them, listen, shiurim, everyone has their taste and flavor. But we could say one thing, that Rabbi Zecharia Resnik shiur, in a certain sense, is a shiur b'makim shein tamidei chachamim. It's unique, it stands out. There are no other shiurim that are being learned and taught in this quick, concise, and clear way with that energy, that passion, that excitement. The people that reach out, one of the underlying themes in their thank you messages is the excitement and the energy that Rabbi Zecharia brings to the daf on a daily basis. The program will continue. We have a very chash of a guest speaker. Then we'll have the Siyum. Zecharia will speak for a few minutes, and then we will conclude. It will be the quick Siyum. I would like to call upon Rabbi Steinmetz, who's a Rosh Kollel here in Lakewood, Kollel Cheshek Shlomo, who's a Mechaber Svarim, Sifrei Lev HaMelech, which are used in yeshivas across the globe. Just to get into this unique Kollel, speaking of unique, every person has to be ahead on 250 blot of Gemara to get into this very, very unique Kollel. They have unique hours, and what they've built just to be able to enhance the lives of these Talmidei Chacham and their families is incredible. Something truly unique. Close Talmud of Shmuel Kamenetsky, Yibal L'chaim, Rebellia Svei. I'd like to call upon Rabbi Asher to say a few words.
Bershos, Moshe, Schwed, and the coordinators of today's event, my dear friend Rabbi Zecharia, honored Mesaimim, Moronan v'Rabbanan v'Rabboisai. Gemara Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, Dorash Rava Mai Dichsiv. Rava has a question. What's the understanding of the pasuk we say in Hallel? The pasuk in Tehillim, Kapitel Kuf Tez Zayin. Ohavti ki yishma Hashem. I love when Hashem listens to me. Explains Rava. Omra Knesses Yisrael Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Rabbeinu Shel Olam. Klal Yisrael says to Hashem, Ein Masai ani ahuva lefanecha. When am I loved by you? Bizman she'ata shemeya koil tachanunoi. At the time that you hear the voice of my tefillah. There are two glaring questions on this Gemara. Question number one. The pasuk says, Ahavti, I love. And Rava says, Eimasai ani ahuva lefanecha. When am I loved by you? Question number two. The pasuk says, Ahavti ki yishma Hashem. I love when Hashem listens to me. Isn't that obvious? Who doesn't love being listened to? Isn't that self-evident? We all love when our tefillahs are neskabel. What's the message? What's the lesson of this Gemara? Says the Sefer Iye Hayam, authored by a Talmud of the Heilige Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Edel, more famous for his Sefer Meinif Toyach on the Rambam's Hagdama to Seder Tyrus. Iye Hayam Psachim Oy Samach. Ein Loshin Ava Noifeles Zulas B'Sheshneihem Nehovim Ze Al Ze. The term Ava is only applicable. The term love can only be appropriate when the feeling is mutual. When the one who loves is beloved. And when the one is beloved, loves. Hanehovim v'haneimim b'chayeyim. That's Ava. Tehillim Kapitel Kuf Mem Beis. Koili el Hashem ezok. Koili el Hashem eschanon. Explains the Iyayam. There are two voices that cry to Hashem. There's the Koili el Hashem ezok. There's the koil that's a mere cry. Without expression, without articulation, without detail. And there's the Koili el Hashem eschanon. There's the voice of pleading, of tachanon, of tefillah, of proper tefillah. Dorash Rava Mai Dichsiv Ohavti Ki Yishma Hashem. And there are two glaring questions. The pasuk says, Ahavti, I love. Rava explains, when am I loved? Additionally, what's the message of this pasuk? This chazal, isn't it obvious? We all love when our tefillahs are answered? Explains the Iyayam. Ahavti, I love you, Hashem. And because Ein loshin ava noifeles zulas b'sheshneim nehovim ze al ze. Because the term ava is only appropriate and applicable when the feeling is mutual. I know you love me. But ein mosai ani ahuva lefanecha. When is that love felt? When is it apparent? When is it tangible? Bizman sha'ata shemeya koil tachanunoi. when you could hear a mere voice, a mere cry from me, without articulation, without expression, but because you love me, you understand my intent, that's when your love can be felt. V'neiras ha'ma'or perik Reshud Gimel Maisa b'chassid echad, a story. Shahaya misyachid b'makam echad, he had a hideout. V'haya loimid b'meseches chagiga. And in that hideout, he learned Mesechtes Chagiga. But he didn't end there. Umahapich ba, umahadra. He delved into it, and he fulfilled what we say today. Hadrin alach, day in, day out. Umahadra, he reviewed and reviewed, until Hoise Shigura befiv, he attained fluency. But he never learned another Mesechta his entire life. He was nifter. He had no family, he had no friends. No one knew. A woman came. V'harima koila bebechi. She raised a crying voice and says, honor this man. Shekibduni kol chayav. He cherished me, he appreciated me, he honored me his whole entire life. And the women came to console her, and the men came to honor him, and he had a kavod gadol. They turned to the woman and they asked her, Ma shemeich, what's your name? She said, Shmi Chagiga. And when the processions concluded, she vanished. And they realized that the Mesechta that he was Kibdu Kol Chayav, the Mesechta that he was Mahapich Bo Mahadra, came to ensure that he would have a Kavod Gadol. Concludes the Menairas HaMa'or with a Kal V'chaimer. Uma Chosid Zeh, that merely learned but one Mesechta. He merited a Kavod Gadol. Surely someone who's Loimed Torah Harbe. Surely someone like everyone that's participating in today's event, who has learned Brachos, Shabbos, Erevin, Psachim, Rosh Hashanah, Yuma, Sukkah, Beya, and Shkalim from Talmud Yushalmi. Surely they deserve a Kavod Gadol al Achas Kama V'Kama. Concludes the Menairas HaMa'or with another Kal V'chaimer. Uma Chosid Zeh, who merely learned but one Mesechta, merited such a Kavod Gadol. Surely someone who's Melamid Torah L'Acherim. Surely someone who teaches and he's Maimed Talmidim Harbe, like the stellar Maggid Shiurim of the Oldaf. And like Rabbi Zecharia, who's here today, whose patented, precise, perfect pshat is unparalleled. And don't think it comes to him easy. I know the amount of hours he invests in one daf, the amount of yigiyah, the amount of effort and toil that he puts to deliver you the clearest and most perfect pshat possible can only be described as Mesiras Nefesh. Someone who's such a Kavod Gadol al Achas Kama V'Kama. Sefer Hakana ala Mitzvahs, says the Chida Shem Hagdolim Areches Asfarim Ois Ayin Aleph. It was authored by one of the Rabbanan Saviroi, that means post Gemara pre Ga'onim. Sefer Hakana ala Mitzvahs Zayin Amud Aleph. Chacham. What is a Chacham? Not merely someone who learns and knows, but someone whose nafshoy is kshura ben nafsha shel Torah. Someone whose personality, someone whose essence, someone whose self is interwoven, embedded together with the personality of the Torah. Like this chassid, who wasn't satisfied with learning. He was mahapich bo mahadra. He said hadrin alach every day. He showed his ahavti. And he saw the bizman shani ahuva lefanecha. Hanahovim v'hanaimim b'chayeyem u'b'moisam lo nefradu. Today we celebrate the Siyum of the 8th Mesechta of Talmud Bavli. And today we stand 2 weeks before the 8 days of Chanukah. Darkei Moshe Siman Tofresh Ayin Ois Aleph, in the name of the Maromi Prague, quoting the Mordechai Orech and the Or Zarua, that the Megillus Tainus says that Chazal established Chanukah as a commemoration of the Chanukas HaMizbeach, the re-inauguration, the rededication of the Mizbeach Sheshoktzim Malchi Yavan, that the Malchi Yavan defiled. Asks the Ramah, the Gemara says, Shabbos Chafalef from Beis, that Chazal established Chanukah because of Nasa Boy Nes, V'hedliku Imenu Shmoinas Yamim, because of the Nes of the Neiris. Megillus Tainus says Chazal established Chanukah because of the Chanukah. The Gemara says because of the Nes of the Neiris. Answers the Ramah. The Chanukas HaMizbeach is the reason for a Mishta B'Simcha. It's the reason for a Suda and for joyousness. But The Nes of the Neiris is the reason for Hallel Vaydah. It's the reason we say Hallel and say Al Anisim on Chanukah. Today is a Chanukah of sorts. It's a time we rededicate ourselves to our commitment, to our enthusiasm, to our excitement, to be part of the massive Torah movement known as the Daf HaYomi. And today is our Mishta V'Simcha. But the Michtav Melayo, Chelik Daled, page 338, asks a question. Every other Chanukah was 7 days. Chanukah's HaMishkan in the Midbar, 7 days. Chanukah's Bayis Rishon of Shlomo HaMelech, 7 days. Chanukah's HaMizbeach, 8 days. Why? Answers the Michtav Melayo, Da Chavivi, know my beloved. Kollel in Yonei Oilam Hazeh Klulim B'Zayin Yomim. Every time you want to express something that's limited to the confines of this world, we use the term 7, the Sheshes Shemei Bereshis, plus the Bo Shabbos Bo Menucha. But Kishabo Lirmois, Dover Shu Ruchni Legamre. When we want to discuss something which is entirely spiritual, B'Madrega El Yoina Ma'oid, something on an entirely different plane, like Shmoinas Yemei Hamila, like Shmini Atzeres, like after 7 times 7 of Sfira Sa'omer, we have Matan Torah. That's the number 8. Chanukah, says the Michtav Melayo, is out of this world. Today is the 8th time we said Hadrin Alach on a Masechta of Talmud Bavli. And we stand 2 weeks before Mahadrin Mina Mahadrin. It's a time that's Ruchni Legamri, B'Madrega El Yoina Ma'oid. May I suggest that every once in a while, maybe every day, we take out one of our old friends, maybe a brachis, maybe a beya, maybe Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, and we look at it for 5 minutes, and we say Ahavti, we say Hadrin Alach, Mahapich Bo Mahadra, we enjoy a few lines, appreciate them, savor them, and the next day when we take our tefillin off, maybe Ben Gavra LeGavra, maybe 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, we look at those same lines, maybe a couple more. Let this Hadrin Alach be Mahadrin Mina Mahadrin. Tanchuma Parshas Noach Piska Gimel. V'ahavta es Hashem elekecha b'chol avavcha. There's a mitzvah of Avas Hashem. You should love Hashem with your whole essence. Explains the Tanchuma unequivocally. Ein ava zu ela loshin Talmud. This ava is what you do each and every day. That you learn Talmud. You learn a Blat Gemara. That's Avas Hashem. That's the exclamation of Ahavti. We should all be Zayche to continue expressing day in, day out, Ahavti, with Ein Avazu El Loshen Talmud. And we should express Hadrin Alach day in, day out, with being Mahapich Bo Mahadra. And we should all be Zayche to know and to feel, Bizman Shani Ahuva Lefanecha, that the feeling is mutual. And we should all have that all our kailis, all the voices, all our feelings, all our desires, Lataiva, should be received as Tachanunoi, as if they're proper tefillas. But first and foremost, our deepest and truest tefillah, Yiskadel v'yiskadesh me'raba, ba'alma duhu osid l'schadasa, bebias Mashiach tzidkenu b'mheira v'yameinu, amen v'amen.
We'll now proceed with the Siyum, Rabbi Zecharia making the Siyum and speaking for a few minutes. I just want to read 2 messages that we've gotten in the last couple of weeks for Rabbi Zecharia. I'm not sure he's seen them yet. We try to send them as quick as possible. We're not as quick as the quick daf always. A message we got from a teenager. He says, he says his name, a New Jersey teenager who loves the quick daf and quick parsha shiurim. You don't know how much I appreciate your shiurim, both for understanding the Rashis on the parsha and the tough parts of the daf. You even bought and shipped the Gemara to my house before Pesach, like 5 months ago. I didn't know that. Thanks so much for that. No need to do that, but it was an amazing chesed. Zecharia takes the chesed and puts it together with the Torah. Also, Gemara and Rosh Hashanah, putting the Torah together with the Gemilas Chasadim was the reason why Abaya lived an extra 20 years. I'll take an extra 20. Me and your message number 1. Message number 2. Thank you so much for your amazing quick daf shiur. I usually listen to it in the car, running errands to prep the daf, and when I sit down with the Gemara, I have more of a geschmack because I'm already familiar with many of the concepts. There are some days that I'm overwhelmed and I just listen through with the Gemara and I'm able to keep up with the Olam. Thanks so much for a clear and reliable share. Thank you, Zecharia. Again, the underlying message we've gotten from so many people is the geschmack and the ability to be able to prep the daf, chaz the daf. So thank you, Rabbi Zecharia. Thank you so much for coming. I guess we have to thank your sister for making our mitzvah this week in Lakewood, which allowed Rabbi Zecharia to quickly come here to Lakewood for literally 72 hours? About 72 hours. Rabbi Zecharia.
Okay. Yashikar for all the kind words. All the secrets are out. How the daf was started, how long it takes to prepare a daf, some kind words from listeners so we can jump right into it. My sister's bar mitzvah, my oldest nephew, his bar mitzvah, so I have to thank him and the entire extended family for enabling me to come in, fly in, be able to join a simcha with another simcha and have the Siyum together. Being part of the All Daf initiative has been something that's quite overwhelming for me because I've never been part of something so grand and so large, really ever in my whole life. Kind of just grew up like a regular yid, and being part of something so big that goes across the entire world. I'm in touch with a close friend of mine who was mentioned before, who we said we're not going to say his name, who is really the driving force behind the daf. He's the only reason why the daf happens. I give a shiur, but he's the reason behind why the shiur happens. Hamev and Yavin. And we're in touch with Reb Moshe, not on a daily basis, sometimes on a weekly basis, just everything All Daf is doing, not just All Daf, All Parsha, and hopefully many all fill-in-the-blank initiatives that will be happening hopefully soon and in the upcoming years. It's really something very unique to be part of, and I thank Reb Moshe and All Daf and everyone behind it for being able to be part of that initiative. A particular thank you to a close friend of mine, Reb Moshe as well, Asher Tesser, for arranging this Siyum and not involving me at all. All I got was the periodical updates sent to my phone to figure out, what's happening, how it's going to happen, and what it's going to be. But the fine minutia and the details of the backs and forth, when is it going to happen, what time, where, how, what, that would have, I don't know if I probably would have stayed in Eretz Yisrael if I would have been involved in all the planning. So I appreciate you for not involving me in the planning and really pulling off this absolutely beautiful and magnificent Siyum. And really, I feel like we should pause for 2 minutes so everyone can refill their plates and enjoy some food. Please feel comfortable to go pick up some food if you would like to along the way. It's okay, this is not a classroom. You don't have to raise your hand if you'd like to get up and eat and move around. Last but not least, it would behoove me to not give a deep debt of gratitude. A debt of gratitude to the one that sponsored this Siyum. It's an absolutely magnificent spread coming from Eretz Yisrael. Usually when you have a Siyum, it's a couple of, rugelach and a little bit of herring. You hear the stories back in the day. It's a little bit of schnapps, maybe some plum brandy. That's what we're used to in Eretz Yisrael. So over here, this is like a 5-star plus Siyum from what I'm used to. This is really a magnificent Siyum, and the one that sponsors Siyum, him and his family should be zeicha to brachas and nachas and parnasa and shefa and me'ev esrim. So, as we know, life is a galgal achayzer. Everything always goes around. And we always want to connect the beginning to the end, to the end to the beginning. We finish the Torah, we start the Torah again. We finish the Masechta, we start another Masechta right away. So we always have to connect the end to the beginning. We're finishing Maseches Rosh Hashanah, and we're starting Maseches Tainus. So what does Rosh Hashanah have to do with Tainus? What do these two Masechtas have to do with each other? We also know, I've heard from Moshe Hauer of the OU many times personally, and if you look in the Ma'arei Einayim, I don't think there's a single parsha where he doesn't write the following idea, the following concept, which is we know that Torah is Torah's Chaim, and everything that we have, everything that's in the Torah, every parsha is relevant to our everyday life, no matter where we are, no matter who we are, and where we are in the world, at any time, any place. So what do these week's parshas, Parshas Vayetze, Parshas Vayishlach, what do they have to do with finishing Maseches Rosh Hashanah, starting Tainus? Last but not least, we have Chanukah, which is coming up in 2 weeks. We just heard from Rabbi Usher, a little bit of shaykhus between the 8th Masechta and the 8 days of Chanukah. What does Maseches Rosh Hashanah and Tainus have to do with Chanukah as well? So we have this whole pile on the table. We're going to try to sort it out and hopefully bring it all together. So Rosh Hashanah, very shortly, And very simply, and we're gonna pull this theme through. Masechtas Rosh Hashanah is the Masechta that we learn about what real Chaim is, what real life is. We know that Sifrei Chaim and Sifrei Mesim are open in front of Kodesh Brichu on Rosh Hashanah, and we daven for life. So usually when we're sitting and davening for life, we're not just davening for to be alive that year. A lot of us, I would assume that most of us are assuming that we're going to live the next year, and usually we're not davening necessarily to just live, but we're davening to live a life of geschmack, a life of excitement, a life of parnasa and kinderlach and parnasa and shefa and health and everything. But also, what we're really davening for is a life of geschmack, a life of living, a life of real living, a life of excitement. And the Sfarim say that Sifrei Chaim, Sifrei Mesim Ptuchim in front of Hashem, and Hashem signing us in Sifrei Chaim is real. Are you going to be a lebedika yid? Are we going to live a life of lebedika yiddishkeit, something excited, being connected to Hashem? And that's the way you live a life of lebedika yiddishkeit, which is V'atam adveikim Hashem lekechem Chaim kol hayom. If you're davak to Hashem, you're davak to the Mechayei Chaim. So then you have a life of Chaim, you have a life of excitement, and that goes right into Maseches Tainis. Daf Beis Amud Aleph on the bottom, Beis on the top. We talk about the keys. So if you ever walk into a building, maybe in Manhattan, haven't seen one of these in a while, or you see perhaps the guy by the shul, he has a whole ring of keys, maybe 100 keys or more. Some of them are rusty, maybe some of them don't even work to locks anymore, but he has them on his key ring. So Hashem has a big key ring with many locks. He's opening many locks. He's doing a lot of things with those keys. The Gemara says that there's 3 keys that Hashem keeps, and he doesn't give to anyone else. Those 3 keys he always keeps on his person. Maybe he'll give them out a little bit, machlekes in the Gemara, if he gives them out always or not. Sometimes Rashi, Tosfos, he takes those keys, always keeps them with himself. What are those keys? Water, childbirth, and Tchias HaMesim. Those are the 3 keys. These are the very source of life. The source of life, Kodesh Brichu, he keeps the source of life. He keeps those keys with him. And perhaps to understand what those keys are and what they do, we can reach back to Chava and the Nachash. We're reaching all the way back now to Parshas Bereshis, all the way back to the beginning of the world, the beginning of creation. We have this machlekes between Chava and the Nachash. It seems like an interesting machlekes. What exactly is going on? The Nachash says, eat from the tree. It's amazing. Why don't you take a bite? Chava says, I can't eat from it. I'm going to die. The Nachash says, you're not going to die if you eat from the tree. What are they arguing about? What exactly? You're going to die? You're not going to die? Chav, in essence, was saying is that if I do an Avera, I cut myself off from the very source of life itself. So yes, maybe physically I'll be living in this world, but I have no chiyas, I have no connection to Kodesh Brichu, I have nothing. I'm not living. That's not called living. That's called dying. After you do an avera, eating from the tree, you cut yourself off. And the Nachash says, you don't cut yourself off. What are you talking about? We have no connection anyway to Kodesh Brichu. He perhaps created the world, but he doesn't run the world. He has nothing to do with that at all. So you can eat from the Eitz Hadas. There's nothing wrong with it. And we see that in Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is the physical embodiment of the Nachash. We see that in Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim was completely disconnected. They believed in Hashem. Obviously, there was Hashem that created the world. But Parei says, I run everything down here. There's nothing from Hashem. That's why Mitzrayim didn't have any rain. What's one of the keys? One of the keys is rain, Mayim. We know it didn't rain in Mitzrayim. It was just the Nile River provided everyone with their water. They had no shaykhs. They didn't need Hashem. Hashem didn't do anything. Hashem had nothing to do with Mitzrayim, according to the Mitzrayim and Parei. What was next? We know that Parei commanded that all the babies have to be killed. So he asks the Jewish midwives, Shifra and Pua, he says, how is it that the babies are still being born? What's their lashon that they use? They say, what are we supposed to do? The Jewish women, ki chaya is heina, is lashon of chaya. We know the Gemara says that the key of chaya, the key of childbirth is called chaya. Chaim, real Chaim is connection to Kodesh Brichu. Childbirth is real Chaim, connection to Kodesh Brichu. And that's what really the message that they were saying. These Jewish women, they're connected to Hashem. They're coming from Hashem, and that's where childbirth is. Childbirth is one of those keys that you have no access to, Parei, and that's why you can't do anything about the babies being born. There's no option. You're out of the picture on this one. And last but not least is Tchias HaMesim. The Mitzrayim didn't believe in Tchias HaMesim. They didn't believe that there was a life after a life, and therefore they embalmed all the bodies. And they said there is nothing, so therefore there's no reason to bury anyone. We're just going to embalm everyone. In a way, they're keeping them alive. They're keeping them in this world. Tchias HaMesim is that third key coming from Hashem. Being connected to the Mechayei Chaim, being connected to the one that gives us Chaim, that's the real life. That's the real excitement. That's real Leben, Lebedike Yiddishkeit. Being connected to Hashem in any which way, that's real life. And that's what we get out of Maseches Rosh Hashanah and Tainus together. little Tosefes Hesber, which is nice, which has to do with Maseches Sukkah as well. My son, who's here with me, he finished Maseches Sukkah in Cheder, so he said, if you're able to mention Maseches Sukkah, maybe you can mention it also, because this is also a little bit of a theme for him. Maseches Sukkah and Mishnayos. So this has shaychus as well to Sukkah as well. We have Rosh Hashanah, so that's when we start understanding who the Mechayah Chaim is, how we can connect to Kudsha Brichu. We have Sifrei Chaim, Sifrei Mesim, Tuchim, that goes right into Yom Kippur. We're not going to discuss Yom Kippur now, but Yom Kippur as well is the same concept. Tshuva is Milash and Tashev. We're going back to Hashem, we're connecting to Hashem. And then we have Sukkot. What do we have on Sukkot? Sukkot is Diras Ari, we're living on Hashem, Anani HaKavod. Whole discussion about Sukkot. Again, not getting to that now, but what do we see something unique in Maseches Sukkah all the way at the end? They say that for all of Sukkot, we didn't sleep. So there's many things unique about Sukkot. Why do we focus on they didn't sleep for all of Sukkot? Why not? Sleep is echad mishishim b'misa. And when you're connected to Kudsha Brichu, when you're connected to the source of Chaim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, you're going along the entire path, so you don't want to sleep. You don't want to have any connection to Misa whatsoever, even though it's echad mishishim. And that's why they didn't sleep at all. Yeah, the Gemara says that it's possible you can't sleep, yeah, you can't live. Okay, so they nodded off. Beseder, like you're on a plane, you don't really sleep on a plane, you're kind of nodding off, you wake up, but it's not a real sleep. And that's like, they said we can't sleep on Sukkot, so we're going to nod off. But there's no sleeping, because when you're connected to Kudsha Brichu in such a way, you have to be alive, you have to be awake as much as possible. And that's the whole continuation to Sukkot. What was the reason why they weren't sleeping? They weren't sleeping because of Simchas Beis HaSheva. She'eva is She'ivas HaMayim. They're drawing water. What's She'ivas HaMayim? Mayim is Torah. As we said, Mayim is one of the keys. Mayim is also Parnasa, but Mayim is Torah as well. We know that Mayim comes from a high place to a low place, just like Torah. We say the Bas Ayin's yard says tomorrow, so we can do something from the Bas Ayin as well. Torah, the Bas Ayin says that the same way that the Gemara in Tainus says, we're going to start with the Gemara first and then the Bas Ayin. The Gemara in Tainus says, you want to be able to accept Torah, so just like water goes from a high place to a low place, so too Torah, the only way it can really rest on you is a person has a little bit of humility, a little bit of anava. A person has to be mashpul himself and lower himself, and that's the way he can really absorb Torah. Says the Bas Ayin, it's the same thing with Neiros Chanukah, which we're going to really get to in a minute. We're jumping ahead, we'll work our way backwards as well. Neiros Chanukah, you bend down. Chanukah is Torah as well. You bend down to light the Neiros Chanukah, and that's the way to really absorb the message of Chanukah. But working back to the Parshas, because that's the order we said we're going to go in, so we really shouldn't be going out of order. The Parshas, what do the Parshas have to do with anything? So right now, these are the Parshas of Yaakov Avinu. And Yaakov Avinu, we know Yaakov Avinu loy meis. Yaakov Avinu didn't die. We know Parshas Vayechi is a Parsha that Yaakov Avinu, so to speak, died in, but it says Vayechi. It's a Parsha Vayechi. Vayechi is a Lebedika Parsha. It's an excited Parsha. It's a Parsha of living. It's not a Parsha of death. We know that Yaakov Avinu loy meis. We know that his Dmus Yukane, his Tzuras Panim is Tachas Kisei HaKavod. We learned in Maseches Rosh Hashanah, the reason where you hold the discussion with Rabbi Gamliel, that you have to have, you're not allowed to make a form of a moon or stars or any of the celestial bodies. Also, face of a man you're not allowed to make. Why? Because the face of a man up on the Kisei HaKavod, Hashem is also sometimes referred to as a man. Who is that? That's Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, he was so connected to Kudsha Brichu in whichever way he was. So he's loy meis. He went, perhaps he was the only person the Mitzrayim should have embalmed. Perhaps that's only because he was really the only one that stayed alive at Mitzrayim. All the Mitzrayim dead, and they stayed dead, and there was no one after them. But Yaakov Avinu, he was the only one that was alive. What did Yaakov Avinu give us? Yaakov Avinu, say the Sfarim, gave us Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's Yaakov Avinu. He gave us Torah Sheba'al Peh. A nice remez is that Parshas Vayechi, which is the Parsha of Yaakov Avinu, has Pei, Hei, Psukim, Peh. So Yaakov Avinu gave us Torah Sheba'al Peh. We get Torah Sheba'al Peh from Yaakov Avinu. So the chiyus that we can bring into our lives to keep us constantly alive, constantly feeling a chiyus and a lebedikkeit and a life for Yiddishkeit is Torah Sheba'al Peh, focusing on that Torah Sheba'al Peh. And that brings us to Chanukah, really. We know Ba'al Leischa is the Parsha of lighting the Neiros, and Aaron HaKohen was a little bit disappointed. He didn't have what to do with the B'niyas HaMishkan. He wasn't able to be involved in it. And Hashem says, don't worry. I think it's perhaps the first Rashi in Parshas Ba'al Leischa. He says, don't worry. Shelcha gadel mishalohem shatamadik umetiv esaneres. But what's the word that Hashem uses before he says, Shelcha gadel mishalohem? Chayecha. Chayecha. Why this word of chayecha? Chayecha, it's your chayim. Your life is lighting neiros. That's your life. That's what gives you chiyas, is lighting neiros. Chayecha. Chayecha is also milash and shvua, but over here we're understanding chayecha, it's your life. Your life is lighting neiros. Shatamadik umetis neiros forever and ever. Lighting neiros is going to be something that gives chayim. How is lighting neiros to give something chayim? Okay, very briefly, is that we know neiros is you light shemen. Shemen is something that floats all the way to the top. If you don't take shemen, you don't bring it down, so then it's just going to float all the way up. We know that Torah is chachma. Chachma is something that comes all the way from a very high place. We don't have access to it. We have to be able to pull that chachma down. So lighting neiros is taking a chachma ilah, is taking a chachma that's all the way up in Shemayim, bringing it down and making it relevant to our everyday lives. That's what lighting Chanukah neiros is. We know that every keli in the Mishkan, corresponds to something. So, for example, the Arna Kodesh corresponds to Tarsha B'chsav. We know that the Shulchan is Parnasa. And we know that the Menorah corresponds to Tarsha B'al Peh. So here we have the Menorah corresponding to Tarsha B'al Peh. Lighting Neres Chanukah, lighting the Menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, that's Tarsha B'al Peh. So when we're lighting those Neres Chanukah, we're bringing that Tarsha B'al Peh into our lives. We're bringing that Chiyos of Yaakov Avinu, his Dmus, of Yaakov Avinu Loimes, bringing that Tarsha B'al Peh, Pehei Psukim and Parshas Vayechi, bring that into our lives to give us chiyas, to give us that excitement for Yiddishkeit on a daily basis through the Tarsha B'al Peh. And to be, in Hebrew we say to be mitmaked, to focus on one more nakuda. This week's Parsha, Parshas Vay, well, we're just coming off of Shabbos, it's still Sunday, it still could be considered up until Tuesday perhaps. This week's Parsha, Yaakov Avinu went on Vayetzi Yaakov Beersheva Vayel Charana, and he went to sleep. So everyone says, what's Sulam Mutzav Arza? We have this whole ladder which is going all the way up to Shemayim. What do we learn from this ladder? That ladder is Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu is a person who he's a Sulam Mutzav Arza and he's Rosh Hashanah. And Be'etzem, every Yid has to be the same. A Yid, his head has to be in Shemayim. That doesn't mean you should be aloof and floating around bumping into walls. Your Kol Chassid Shaita, I think this Gemara in Saita perhaps says that, I don't remember. A person's head always has to be on Shemayim. What does that mean? A person always has to be connected to Kodesh Baruch Hu. He always has to be thinking about Torah, thinking about something, thinking about Avodas Hashem, thinking about another Yid, thinking about helping someone, whatever it is. He always has to be connected to Yid and connected to Kodesh Baruch Hu somehow. That's Rosh Hashanah. But a person also always has to have Sula Mutzav Arza. He has to be firmly planted here because we live here. We live in this world. We work, we learn, we're involved. We go to shul, we interact with people. And being involved in this world, being a Sula Mutzav Arza, that means that we take everything that we're thinking about, everything that's in our heads, that's focused, our what we'll call the spirituality, the Yiddishkeit that we have in our heads, and we bring it to the table. We make it real in our interactions with our family, our friends, our neighbors, everyone in shul, wherever we learn, in our workplace, wherever it is. We break it, we bring it in, and we make it relevant, and we make it real. And we do that specifically at this time. The dark times, we live in dark times, not to sound foreboding and spooky, but we know, it's a challenging dar to live in, and everyone knows it's a challenging dar to live in, and especially, we know, the Chazal say, with Sfarim talk about how Chanukah is at a very dark time of the year. It's starting to get dark, it's starting to, perhaps, a little bit of a depressing time. It can be a little bit sad and depressing. It gets dark, and the nights are longer, and it gets colder. I come from Eretz Yisrael, so it's still much warmer over there. Over here, it says it gets cold. I didn't even bring a coat. It's okay, we're fine, didn't catch a cold. That's specifically a time where we focus on bringing Tarsha B'al Peh into our lives, focusing, making Siyum, learning Gemara, Nachadaf, Masechta, keep on going. We bring that light. We light the Chanukah Neres. As we said before, we mentioned the Bas Ayin. Chanukah Neres as well is just like Torah, the same way you want to accept Torah, you have to be mashpal yourself as a humility. So too, when we light Neres Chanukah, we light them below 10 tefachim. You have to bend down. In order to bring that light, you have to be able to bend down. You bring that light from up, you bring it down, you light the Neres Chanukah. When is it that we're allowed to light Neres Chanukah? Ad shetichla regel min hashuk. Until the regel leaves the shuk. What does it mean until the regel leaves the shuk? What does it say? Ad shetichla adam min hashuk. Until people leave the marketplace. Shetichla regel. Regel is the lowest part of a person's body. Even the lowest person, there's no low person, but even the person in the lowest matziv, Chanukah Neres can bring that light into a person's family, can bring that light into a person's life, can give that person that vayechi, can give that person where he's constantly living, he's constantly excited, constantly connected to Kodesh Baruch Hu. So Be'ez Hashem, we should be zeicha to finish many more Masechtas together, be zeicha to learn, to constantly bring the Tarsha B'al Peh into our lives, to give us that chiyas, to give us that excitement for life. Yaakov Avinu loy meis through Tarsha B'al Peh, and we should be zeicha through Neres Chanukah and through all of our Tarsha B'al Peh. We should be zeicha to bring Mashiach Tzidkenu b'meher v'yameinu, amen v'amen. Okay. For the Siyum, for this little Dvar Torah, I allowed myself to go a little bit more than 8.5 to 12.5 minutes. Help the Elam's Michael. Okay. Here. Okay. For the Siyum, we'll go quick. Okay. So the Mishnah was discussing whether or not the Shliach Tzibur is going to be Mitzi everyone, is not going to be Mitzi everyone. The Tefillah, do people have to say their own personal Tefillah, or could they be Yaitzi with him? So the Gemara says, as we say, 2 lines out from the bottom, the first word on the line. Nope, wrong starting place. Edit that out. Okay, we'll do it 5 lines up from the bottom, the third word on the line. Amar Vacha bar Avira, Amar Reb Shimon Chasida, Paita Reb Shimon Gamliel, Filu Am Shabbasades. Rabbi Gamliel said that even the people that are out in the fields, and they're not in shul, they're going to be yaitze with the Shliach Tzibor's tefillah. V'lemi by Hani Dekam Yehacha, and for sure the people that are in shul, of course they're going to be yaitze with the Shliach Tzibor. They don't really have to daven on their own. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Hani Nisi, Hani Loy Nisi. The people that are out in the fields, they're honest. What are they supposed to do? They're out in the fields. They can't come to shul. Okay, so they'll be yaitze with the Shliach Tzibor. But if you're in shul, of course you should be davening. Why are you not davening if you're in shul? So Tani Abba Breid Rabbi Binyan Barchia Am Shachar Kahanim. The people that are behind the Kahanim when they're doing Birchas Kahanim, Ein B'chlal Bracha, so they're not included in the bracha because if you're there and you're behind the Kahanim, so you're not going to be Yotze. You should just be standing in front of the Kahan. It's only the people that are out in the Sades, the people out in the fields, they can't be by the Kahanim, so then they're going to be Yotze with the Kahanim. Then they're going to get gebenched. So the Gemara says, you're right. Ela Ki Asa Rav and Amar Rav Yaakov Bar Idi Amar Rav Shimon Chasida Loi Patar Gamliel Ela Am Shabbasades. He only pater the people out in the fields. They can't come to shul, so therefore they're going to be Yotze with Shliach Tzibur Tefillah. My time that's because they have to go, they have to work, and therefore they have to be out in the fields, and they can't be they can't daven on their own, so they can be yotze with Shliach Tzibur Tefillah avol be'ir loy. But in the city, some say it's in the city, some say we're talking about in shul itself. You're not going to be yotze with Shliach Tzibur because you could daven on your own, and therefore you should daven on your own, not be yotze with Shliach Tzibur. Hajanalach Perek Yontif Usliklam Mesechus Rosh Hashanah. Mazel tov to all the Messiahim, and hopefully will be Messiahim. Hajrach Mesachas Rosh Hashanah, Hajrach Chalan. That Enoch Mesachas Rosh Hashanah, that Chalan is necessary. Menach Mesachas Rosh Hashanah, Sis Shem Menach Labal Madin Labal Madasi. Hajrach Mesachas Rosh Hashanah, Hajrach Chalan. That Enoch Mesachas Rosh Hashanah, that Chalan. Lo necessary Menach Mesachas Rosh Hashanah, Sis Shem Menach Labal Madin Labal Madasi. Hajrach Mesachas Rosh Hashanah, Hajrach Chalan. That Enoch Mesachas Rosh Hashanah, that Chalan. Lo necessary Menach Mesachas Rosh Hashanah, Sis Shem Menach Labal Madin Labal Madasi. Yirtzon Fnach Adonai Lehin Lev Sein Shiter Tayrascha Imunosein Bailam Hazav Sein Mandla Lamba Chanin Bar Papa Roim Bar Papa Nachman Bar Papa Achai Bar Papa Abamar Bar Papa Rafa Bar Papa Rachsh Bar Papa Surcha Bar Papa Ada Bar Papa Dar Bar Papa Harav Adonai Lehin Asperis Chab Finu Fifiasam Chabei Israel V'nei Klon Nachman Setzein Setzein Chabei Israel Klonia Dishmecha V'lem Desher Sech Mevet Chakmenim Secha Kilayim Hili Yehi Libi Sam Chacha Man Loyevash Kilayim Loy Eshchach Bichudecha Kivam Chisani Bar Chatu Adonai Lam Dein Chukecha Amen 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 Salav Oed Moedim Anachnu Lefonecha Adonai Lehin V'levesenu Shesam Tchakin Besh Beis Medrash V'lisam Tchakin Besh B'Kronos She'on Mashkim V'hem Mashkim On Mashkim Divrei Torah V'hem Mashkim Divrei Telum On Amel V'hem Amelum On Amelum Kam Schar V'hem Amelum Kam Schar On Ratzim V'hem Ratzim On Ratzim Chayil Mabah V'hem Ratzim V'er Shachas Shnemar V'ato Elohim Tardim Lev Shachas An Shidom Mirma Lo Yachzu Yimei V'ani Eftach Bach Yirtzon F'necha Adonai Lehaik Shem Shazar Tan Saim Mesechus Rosh Hashanah Kent Hazreni L'Haschem Mesechus Star Macherim U'Saimam Lilmod Lamid Lishma V'Lasus Kaim Kol V'Sam Terzech V'Avos Chus Kol Tenem Amrem Tamdei Cham Yam B'Li Zari Shloi Som Shatam Pi Pizari V'Zari Zari Ad Olam V'Zis Kaim Bi V'Salecha Tan Cha'isach V'Shavcha Tishmar Alecha V'Akitzosa Hisis Yichecha Kivi Yer B'Mecha V'Sifel Chashnais Chaim Arich Yom Mina V'Smail Oish V'Chavod Adonai Oizam Oitin Adonai V'Rech Samay V'Shalom.
Wrapping this up. Mazel tov to all the Messiahim. I just want to let everybody know that besides for the quick daf that Rabbi Zecharia gives, there's also a daily parsha shir that he gives. He goes through the aliyahs every single day, and literally 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. You can go through all the psukim with all the Rashis, and he gives a weekly quick vart and a quick recap on the parsha. And Be'ezus Hashem, coming soon, there's going to be a new app that we're launching called All Mishnah in honor of the new Mishnah Yomi cycle, which is starting at the end of the year. And Zecharia Resnik, this is a real cycle. This is not something that we're creating. There's a real Mishnah Yomi cycle, and it's starting again at the end of this year. And Rabbi Zecharia Resnik will Be'ezus Hashem be giving daily Mishnayos, 2 Mishnayos a day. So thank you, Rabbi Zecharia. Rabbi Zecharia, I think we're petitioning for the quick drush. After today's drasha, we're petitioning for the quick drush. What do you think about the quick drush? Anyway, thank you to all for coming, both here and across the globe. Please enjoy the food, and mazel tov to everybody.